All right, so let's just get started now. All right, on the screen, what you see is basically the third and the last stanza of The Pains of Sleep, written by Coleridge. This is the last stanza, and I need to finish this because it's quite an elaborate poem, and it requires a lot of information as well. But before we comment on it, we need to read it. All right. So let's just read it. So I'm going to go through this stanza. We're going to annotate it. We're going to look at why Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who happens to be one of the romantic poets, and how he has composed his third and last night. This poem is particularly called, I've already mentioned also, this poem is The Pains of Sleep. The Pains of Sleep, and this is the last stanza. So you can put up the heading in your notebook. This is the last stanza, which happens to be the dramatic shift, not only in his tone. There's a dramatic shift, but at the same time, this happens to be the last stanza, last night of restlessness for Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So I'm gonna say Samuel Taylor Coleridge. All right, some of the bullet points you keep on making. Now let's read it together, okay? The third night, when my own loud scream had waked me from the fiendish dream, overcome with suffering strange and wild, I wept as I had been a child, and having thus by tears subdued my anguish to a milder mood. Such punishments, I said, were due to natures deeply stained with sin. For in tempesting anew the unfathomable hell within, the horror of their deeds to view, to know and loathe, yet wish and do, yet wish and do. Such griefs with such men will agree, but wherefore fall on me? To be loved is all I need, and whom I love indeed. I think the basic idea is definitely communicated. The punchline, let's say the crux of the entire stanza, is this part where he is seeking for love. And this can be a hint towards the appreciation when it comes to to the public, but also perhaps we are thinking he might have been in love, and this could be an incomplete one-sided relationship on behalf of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So how are you going to study, how you are going to say that what exactly is being communicated in this particular stanza? So how many of you have joined me? Yeah, so Aliza, this is basically the third and the last stanza of the poem, which is known as The Pains of Sleep. And this is his last night, in which he is obviously pleading God to keep him in rest. So he had woken up with his own loud scream, and there is no pause over here. So the line, the idea runs right over here. Had waked me from the fiendish dream. So we know that fiendish dream, it must be a nightmare, and he has been awake, um a nightmare. He has been awake by his own screaming and paranoia that has completely hit him and taken over his entire mental condition. And then he's comparing himself. I wept as I had been a child. As So he's comparing, it's a simile. So he says that I am being old enough, mature enough to understand, but then again he just compared himself, showing his helplessness as a child. And having thus by tears subdued my anguish to a milder mood. So you have dude over here, you have mood over here, you have tears over here. What are they? They are basically called as assonance. All right. So what are we doing? The good rule is when you want to annotate or comment on the poetry section, you have to generate a point. What are we doing? We are generating a point. We're identifying there's a use of simile. Another point is the assonance. Another issue, the problem that is being confronted by Samuel Taylor Coleridge is his nightmare. He's restless. The body becomes ill later. It's the soul, your spiritual connection with God. If you find it to be kind of, it's damaged or it's not as strong as it had been, then the soul, the spirit, the inner self, the conscience is going to be always restless. And so it has happened with him. I have already mentioned that Samuel Taylor Coleridge took opium in order to be inspired to compose his poetry. And this was the biggest problem in his life. People who loved and admired him, they never wanted him to. As a poet, he happens to be obviously, a role model for everyone, and people disapprove of it. So the third and final stanza once again takes a dramatic shift. This is basically the theme of suffering. We have previously talked about, and suffering is inevitable. You cannot control, you cannot tame it. It's bound to happen. So the first two stanzas, dear students, it was the previous two nights, and this is the third and the last night. It is painful, restless. So suffering is indicated by the two expressions you see, where he talks about wept, and then he's going to talk about his tears as well. The word expression anguish, you see punishment. So lexical choice, vocabulary choice is loaded with. When we talk about the lexical choice, that means the vocabulary choice has a strong pessimistic. It has a strong pessimistic attitude. So he has been definitely confronted with that. So this is a climax that you people are reading, and he actually cried, and he's kind of writing it as an anecdote also. So the main idea that we discussed is about turmoil, that is suffering. Then I have this pessimism. Coleridge also uses the expression sin over here, hell over here. So if you notice that both of these words create emotions within the reader of dread. So what effect do they create? Dreadful. They create quite dreadful. It shows this dread for Coleridge is a dread for punishment for the sins. Dread of punishment for the sins that he has committed, which signifies to the reader that a confession needs to be made of the sins. So he's trying his best to avoid any sort of dread by confronting and making a confession. So, but when people cry, crying is basically a concept that is related to purging of your soul, the purification. That polluted soul has to be purified, and that's how you do it in prayers, and you cry. So that's the purging effect which is to be given. This means this poem is the foundation for his spiritual bonding, for spiritual bonding with God. So can we say that it has religious connotations? It has religious connotations. I haven't talked yet about the pace of the poem. I'm still talking about the choice of the vocabulary. I'm still talking about what effects by the words or expressions will be made. Interestingly, we do have like an exclamatory mark over here. To know and loathe, yet wish and do such griefs, with such men well agree. But wherefore fall on me? So he asks this rhetorical question. It's almost like now he has come in contact with God. He does not use anywhere God. He does not use anywhere God. But we know that it's a poem written in the format of a prayer, and he's definitely talking to God. This is called implicitly giving a prompt to the reader to even further, make a contextual understanding of the poem. So he basically uses symbolism to some sort of religious imagery. It does show his struggle, that he's trying to be more spiritual. It does show that he does not mention God's name anywhere throughout his poem. This turmoil also seems to be a result of heavy thinking. When I talk about heavy thinking, you need to see that the stanza is tightly punctuated. I do not have run-on lines. Now I need to raise the annotations so that I can focus better on the punctuation, and I can talk about, let's highlight. So I have comma right over here. I have here Cesora, I have here, then I have comma, then I have exclamatory mark, I have question mark, I have again comma, again. So I am being constantly stumbled by tight punctuation. I have here semicolon. With all of these, you need to say that it's basically this, the steadiness, the poem, the steadiness of the pace signifies not only the heaviness of his heart, but as if, please continue, as if there is a burden upon his soul and he has to get rid of it. Let me tell you something interesting about Samuel Taylor Coleridge. The last line specifically, when it talks about, let me take you towards the last few lines. Do I have Aliza with me? Laiba Abbasi, great to have you, beta. I'm going to recap also, so don't worry about it. This is the last stanza that we are commenting on, and it is The Pains of Sleep, and where Samuel Taylor Coleridge is trying his best to connect with God. He's trying to confess that he has been indulged into some wrong decisions that he has made in his life, and that has put down his career. He wants to hide away. He wants to escape. He doesn't want to confront the public. But there's something interesting happening. Towards the end, he definitely speaks his heart. I'm not saying he was not speaking his heart out throughout the entire stanza. He was, but the conjunction of contrast say, why am I being punished? Why am I the chosen one? Why do I need to suffer? It is so universally appealing. So the repetition of wherefore, the punishment falls on me. The idea is he's intensifying his emotively charged expressions. And what is he longing for? What he was actually dreaming for? To be loved is all I need. And whom I love indeed. We are given an impression that perhaps Coleridge loved a woman who is unable to return the love that Coleridge feels towards her. And guess what? Who was this lady? When you read about his biography, or some of the books and the contextual information, you do realize that it was Mary Evans. I'm going to again raise a bit part of it because I don't want to move beyond the lines. I need to just be right over there. And whom I love, this part. So we are talking about, do research about this person. She belonged to the poetic circle of his friends. And so finally, he's confessing, he's finally pour out the truth. And do you feel sympathetic towards him, Laiba, Aliza, Safa? Do you feel that, oh, poor he? He turns out to be a tragic hero who has been all by himself. I'm going to ask these questions. Please keep thinking about them. So what is happening over here? Finally, the turmoil describes throughout the poem, kind of, yeah, Aliza says kind of, the full effects of opium, the drug, um, is like when a person stops thinking, consuming any sort of um, rationality, and he used it specifically. It was there are some of the details which says that he took it because of the doctor who recommended him, and then it turned out to be he became quite like addicted to it, so he started taking on his own. So over the extended period of time, it was not understood by the romantic era why and in what ways Coleridge suffering originated from, why, you know, which could explain Coleridge's night terrors as well as his restlessness. So we do not have any specific. Okay, Aliza is making a point in the chat box. Thank you for communicating. There's all it's really good. Safat, very nice. You actually shared one of the links in the chat box which says we can easily search about. Like, when people realize their mistakes and regret, but they have fallen too deep to turn back. Whoa, that's philosophical. My students happen to be having a depth of life and misery, so it's interesting to note that why we do not have stanzas in this particular. I mean, it's why is it a longer one piece, a chunk of a stanza? There's a reason behind it, because it's an episode based upon his third night where he was woken up by his nightmare and he screamed. So, yeah, this is the end. We have come to terms with the finishing part of the of what? Of the pains of sleep. Guess what? In your Songs of Ourselves, Volume 2, which is your poetry book, there is another short poem which is connected with this particular poem. And that is, let me show you. One of Coleridge's best friend ever. He used to be, let me first of all open up the document. How many of you have heard of William Wordsworth? How many of you have heard of William Wordsworth? I'm sure you must have heard this name. Okay, it sounds familiar, but I'm gonna make you understand what exactly this person and how. Okay, so what you're looking on the screen is another short poem. Guess what? Who is Wordsworth and who is Samuel Taylor Coleridge? They both were the best friends. You won't believe that this person, this poet, is Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and he inspired William Wordsworth to compose poems in the age of enlightenment, to be inspired by nature, by abstract ideas. So for William Wordsworth, his inspiration was Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So when there was a decline in his career, and I just told you everything about how opium created an effect, how he was disgraced in public, critics were not happy, why was he doing so many things to himself? So William Wordsworth wrote a poem, a complaint. He's making a complaint to his one and only, one of the best friends. And let's find out. First of all, before reading, we need to understand what is a complaint all about. And I would like to ask Laiba. Laiba, please, can you read this slide? I want you to read, Beta, this slide.
A Compliant is a short poem by the English romantic poet.
Complaint.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. You don't have to say sorry. We all are learning. We do make mistakes. Fine.
A
Yes.
Complaint is a short poem by the English romantic poet William Wordsworth, published in 1807. The poem is often taken as being about Wordsworth's falling out with his closest friend and fellow poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge. though it can also be read as a commentary on the pain of lost love more generally. The poem portrays the love that speaker used to have as a life enriching force. The loss of this love, in turn, feels like a wellspring of joy has suddenly dried up. In this way, the poem captures the despair felt by anyone who has lost the love of someone dear and can't seem to stop thinking about what used to be.
So this poem is about a complaint that why, Samuel Taylor, why did you do so many things to yourself? Our friendship was like a fountain, and over here, wellspring, spring of joy. So I will definitely let you know. Do you understand how the poems are somehow linked with each other? It's almost like he was losing himself and he was there that he's being nostalgic. William Wordsworth is going back in the past and he's thinking, why can't we be together? I wish things um shouldn't have been happening the way they are now. And let's now you should read. This is 1807. That means this means actually this was romantic period. Romantic does not mean where people were like falling in love with each other. It was more to do with falling in love with nature and relationships and family and anything that could move your heart. Something that could move your heart. All right. So I'm going to now share with you, Beta, the poem itself. And I find it to be beautiful. It's almost like he's sad about it. There are in total 3 short stanzas. A complaint, William Wordsworth. I'll read the first stanza. First of all, let's just go through the whole, and then I will ask Aliza to read the second stanza. There is a change, and I am poor. Your love hath been nor long ago. Wherever you get to see hath, this is the old diction for, I just need to tell you, hath is has. Wherever you come across doth is does. So it's fine. There is a change, and I'm poor. Your love hath been nor long ago a fountain at my fond's heart's door, whose only business was to flow. And flow it did, not taking heed of its own bounty or my need. Yes, beta. Um, Aliza, please read the second stanza.
What happy moments did I count? Blessed was then I then all bliss above. Now for that consecrated fount of murmuring, sparkling, living love. What have I? Shall I dare to tell? A comfortless and hidden well. A well of love, it may be deep. I trust it is, and never dry. What matter if the waters sleep in silence and obscurity? Such change, and at the very door of my fond heart, hath made me poor.
Hmm. I really like the way where you did not take the pause here. When you read, you did not take the pause here. You read it in one go. If the waters sleep in silence and obscurity. And before he says such change, he's using a caesura at the very opening, as if, again, just like Samuel Taylor Coleridge, he also has this heaviness of his heart. But again, there are too many hyphens over here. There are too many pauses over here. So we're going to discuss this later. But first of all, I need to tell you, where is a metaphor hidden in this first stanza? Where is the metaphor? Metaphor, when I compare one thing with another, there is a change and I am poor. You change yourself, you change your nature. Our friendship changed. You have been taken away, you went away, you left me. I am poor, I don't have anyone. Your love as a friend hath been not long ago. We just became friends. We wrote poems together. A fountain at my fond heart's door. Your imagination, your inspiration was like a fountain. So this is a metaphor that is used for his talent. You know, a fountain is moist, it's wet. Wet, moist. Moistness comes with an idea of something, you know, giving life, life giving, because it's water, right? Whose only business was to flow, to make me inspire and allow me to compose my magnificent writing. You were my inspiration, and flow it did. And our friendship flow, I mean, it flowed like a river, not taking heed of its own bounty or my need. So he's saying that you were never dependent on any one of us. You never needed one. You always were independent poet who made his own identity, independent poet, known for his unique style in creativity. You have your own name. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have how many lines? 6 lines in one stanza. And this turns out to be called as sestet. 6 line stanza is known as a sestet. It's again heavily punctuated. Why? Because he's not happy. He is basically heavy heart. He is introducing a problem. There is a problem. Introducing the problem, or there is an issue, right? And again, we have O sounds: poor, door, go, flow, heat, need. So when the lines are rhyming, they have assonance in it. It's a vowel sound, which is highlighted over here. And when they're rhyming together, it means that the poet has accepted the loss of his friendship. Acceptance has come to him. He's organized in his mind. It's rhyming. He's not restless, but he is definitely writing and saving and treasuring this moment that I looked up to you. And then he asked this rhetorical questions. What happy moments did I count? Exclamatory mark. Blessed. Blessed means blessed. Blessed was I than all bliss above. Your friendship was worth than anything else. I was the superior. I used to consider myself the luckiest one. You were my talisman. Now, at the present, for that consecrated fount of murmuring. Murmuring is basically indicative of gossiping, where the critics, where the public is chit-chatting about his career, that now what it has become of. So it was important for me to teach you in the first place the pains of sleep, and then now I'm connecting this poem so that you can understand better how people are gossiping and creating different rumors. You know, we are talking about rumors. Sparkling, living love, what have I? So sparkling, living love, shall I dare to tell? Should I tell you? Where are you now? What have you become? What have you done to yourself? A comfortless and hidden well. It seems that nowhere you're to be found. A well is basically the isolation, like Samuel Taylor Coleridge has been alienated from the society. He took up one of this corner to hide away, not facing, not confronting the public, right? A comfortless and hidden well. So these are the two adjectives which have been used. Well is again a metaphor. So I have a metaphor here, which is fountain. I have a metaphor here for well. And then he calls it a well of love. It may be deep. Perhaps you're still holding a lot of love for all of us as the poetic community. I trust it is and never dry. Your imagination, your poetic work should never go dry. It remains moist. It must have life to it. What matter if the water sleep in silence and obscurity? So waters is basically indicative of Samuel Taylor's creative thinking, and he's saying that it's temporary, that it is sleeping, silent and obscure. So I have sibilant sounds over here. Sibilant sounds. Such change, and at the very door of my fond heart hath made me poor. I'm afraid to open that door, which makes me not recognize you, which makes me feel alienated towards you. I have a fond heart. My heart is warm for you. So he's almost like sympathizing, but at the same time, he sounds a bit complaining and bitter and bitter, not in a sense that he's scolding, but yes, he's not happy with this part. I need to share more details with you, so let me share a document which is all about how you're going to write down. Do you have any questions over here? How do you feel about complaint and Samuel Taylor's and William Wordsworth's relationship? Any idea, any clue, any hint? Any comment on both of their relationship? Do you actually consider that it was wrong on behalf of Samuel Taylor? I wish he couldn't have done that. He could have just been a normal person and living his life and let others live. Mary Evans had a strong connection with William Wordsworth, so it was almost like a love triangle. And Samuel Taylor never spoke his heart and never informed William Wordsworth that the lady with whom you're associated happens to be my love. It's almost like a kind of a complex situation. So, yes, we need to do a bit of reading with that. All right, the document is just uploading, taking 1 minute or so. I'm just opening it up. Any questions here so far? Any question? Yes, now it's opening. Yes, I hope you can look at the screen now. Let me just zoom in a bit so that you can even see it clearly. Okay. So we have it over here, which says, so it's a brief summary. We're going to read it together. Okay. Some of the bullet points have been given also. So it says a complaint tackles the loss or separation of a relationship, though it is contextually implied that it is the end of a friendship. The speaker laments, it's an interesting word, laments the positive memories he has from the friendship by comparison to the loss and emptiness he now feels. I mean, he is definitely on his own. And then we have this picture, which is definitely what? Which is what? Which is fountain. And the speaker opens the poem by addressing the reader, who also acts as addressee. I would ask Liba to read the second bullet point, only second bullet point. He compares love to a fountain.
He compares love to a fountain, perhaps to imply that it is necessary for survival, like water is.
And in the second stanza, he references the positive memories from the relationship. So yes, we have already discussed about it. But in the final stanza, he makes a cyclic movement and he comes back to the same own point which he made in the first one. That is a separation, that is a loss of the friendship, and that has a deeper impact upon him. So this can you can read it at home also, the contextual part. So I will be moving towards this romantic movement. Why such a topic was brought about when it comes to the idea of romantic poetry. So what do we mean by romantic movement or romantic poetry? This will be included as a historical background into your poem. You don't have to copy paste. As it is, you don't have to write it down. You would only lift up the, let's say, some of the parts which are relevantly going to be included in your analysis. So this is important over here, which is known as, it wanted to reject this period, this time frame, wanted to reject cold, unemotional rationalism of Enlightenment culture. People were moving from religion. They were moving away from religion towards science and, traveling and talking more about some logical parts. Now, science, I have already mentioned science, logic, and rationality. And therefore, these people, William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, they are holding themselves, anchoring on to the idea of beauty of nature, past life, protesting against the industrial changing face of the world. Industrial revolution, industries were mushrooming up in the background of this century. So what these romantic community of poets did, they protested institutions and sources of power, church, monarch, army, and used their work to comment on society. So you can see that Samuel Taylor is commenting on the society's mental complexity through his own experience. And they tended to use everyday language. Everyday language hath is for us um, late modern English, but for them it was their accessible English. So this is a general idea, and the usual themes that they used to write upon was love, loss, and grief, which is evident in both of the poems. You have seen it, it's love, loss, and grief also, rather than on one particular person. It goes generally. So I have talked about how they both were best friends, and this is a part, Aliza, he quickly became addicted. Can you read this part? This is about Samuel Taylor Coleridge.
He quickly became addicted and his life quickly became ruined. He eventually moved from the UK, and it is both this physical separation and emotional distance between the two poets that critics believe is explored within A Complaint. Both Coleridge and Wordsworth are considered the pioneers of
Pioneers of the
the English romantic
English romantic.
movement.
So Samuel Taylor sparked the idea that we should begin it, and then William Wordsworth was just by his side, and he was like, "I'm definitely going to help you with it." So they gathered up the other poets, and they started working about it. Now this is interesting. So it says there is a change and I am poor. So it's orange colored. So it's right over here, the analysis of each and every word. I love this part because the annotation becomes so easier. And then I have this brown one. So poor, this could have the literal meaning of being financially poor, or could take a less literal meaning of being deprived of experience, health, love, etc. But with this poem opens the idea that his friendship has been lost and therefore he has been poor. Your love has been no long ago. So the speaker implies that he has lost a lover or friend. In this case, William Wordsworth had lost both. I mean, it gives you an impression also. Mary Evans, you need to investigate about this lady. She was a source of conflict in between both of the friends, but they never confronted each other. They never said it. But it says Wordsworth is in fact writing about his friend Coleridge. So we have already discussed this part, and what I'm looking at is the idea of flow. So at the time, fountains were considered. So I'm going to go back again to Aliza. Can you please read this annotation about flow? This part.
At the time, fountains were considered a symbol of status, and perhaps this image is used to show the strength of love. They also provide water to the public, which is essential for survival, which may be the speaker implying they need love and friendship in order to live.
In order to live. So flow, fountain is basically the symbol of life. and his life is, kept alive. Fountain is basically the poetic talent that he's talking about, indeed. And you don't have to rely only upon the document. When I'm commenting on the text, so you're making up the bullet points, the original interpretation, which comes from Laiba's heart, which comes from Aliza's heart, which comes from Safat's heart, that is going to create more marks for my top ranking grade. I need to be very much assured that how the overall idea is completing the title, a complaint. Any idea, any question that you have over here which you like to share about William Wordsworth poem, A Complaint? My previous students used to say, but why, Miss Nadia? Why he has to write down the complaint and announce it to public that we are not at good terms with each other? Do you have an answer to this question? They were not at all connected with each other. But what most importantly, he wanted to communicate through this poem. What most importantly, he wanted to communicate through this poem.
That he
Laiba,
still
yeah.
cherished this once friendship they had.
Beta, can you please repeat it? Sorry, your voice was lagging. Yes, Mirijan. Ji.
Yes, that he cherished this once friendship they had.
There is kind of like regretting, it's almost like there's something a vacuum, a gap, a space within both of their friendships, right? And he misses those moments and is cherishing it for somehow in this poem, but yet he's not happy, not exactly happy with it. And he also talks, he used possessive pronoun. A chat box gives me the answer. Now, sometimes people want to share. Aliza says sometimes people really want to share. Yes, they want to share that how important you were to me. I looked up to you. What was your, importance in my life was. And now that you're no more there, I find myself at a loss and being empty. So the poet is basically the speaker. Who is the speaker takes a very personal outlook to the general theme of friendship and love, which is rather unconventional for a romantic poet. This may express the severe impact of this loss in friendship has had. So let's just move on. Let's look at some interesting part. Yeah, the interesting part is juxtaposition. If you have forgotten about, and if you don't know what is juxtaposition, not the whole thing, just simply juxtaposes. Juxtaposes means setting a contrast within the same stanza. Contrast, a kind of a difference that I have to show in the nearest proximity between the lines. Juxtaposes his current unhappy emotional state with the happy memories, but he has lost them, emphasized by his separation. Then metaphor, we have already discussed about it. And yes, fountain were usually located or set in the, you know, in the setting of churches. So that shows an ultimate divine power of the importance of friendship, that I took your friendship religiously. All right, so the last stanza, which is related to what we call a well of love, it may be deep. So can anyone tell me, why do we have heavy caesaras over here? We have one caesura, we have second caesura, we have the third caesura, we have a question mark that allows me to take a pause, we have the fourth caesura. So why do we have Safat? Safat, why do you think that we have so many of hyphens acting as a strong pauses? A well of love? It may be deep. I trust it is. And never dry. And then semicolon. Why? Why do we have this? I'm waiting. You
Miss,
tell me. Yes, Safat. Yes.
maybe to indicate his frustration.
Maybe to indicate his frustration, or perhaps he's reflecting upon the consequences that has led to their broken relationship. Yes, I agree. Very good, Safat. What do you have to say, Laiba? Why do we have dramatic pauses? Because he's confused in his mind and the ideas are racing. Again, he's come to the concept of the change. What else do we have when we look at the title, when we look at the analysis over here? Let me reshare the document with you. Yes, we were right over here. So it says, okay. So we have a complaint and we're looking at a three-dimensional over here. We have, it reveals much about the person himself, William Wordsworth. It talks about that how he feels, his grievance, his misery, and then we have a complaint, begins the poem with a formal tone, which juxtaposes the intimate and personal content, which is about to explore in the poem. I mean, he begins a bit formally, obviously. Now they are at a distance, but then he longs for it. Perspective. Perspective means point of view. He uses my, I. He never uses we, inclusive pronoun. When the poet uses I and you, that shows the separation already, that we are two different individuals. But when we use inclusive pronoun we, that shows there's uniformity. But we don't have over here uniformity in any way. It is written in a second person narrative with the speaker addressing someone through the direct address, your, but we know this someone is Samuel Taylor. However, this is the only example of direct address in the whole poem, so it can largely be considered to be just a first person narrative. It is reflective, personal, and speaker can be considered an extension of William Wordsworth himself. So do we have any questions over here? Do we have any questions over here? Not as such. Have we understood the poem? Have we understood the poem? Is the concept of the poem clear? Laiba.
Yes, miss.
Okay, that's lovely. So we have come to the end of the lesson. The poem was quite precise and short. I would definitely share all of these, handouts with you on your WhatsApp. Today is Thursday, and I'm going to generate your assignment. Please take your assignment seriously. Up till now, Aliza's reason I know, and obviously try to be regular. Just a simple request. And Safat and Mahnur, they both have submitted me their assignment over the weekend. If you find any trouble, you can always contact me. I'll guide you, but do finish your assignment, which I'm going to upload on the group. All right, that's it for today. Take good care of yourselves.